Next, we have Ramy Katrib. Ramy is the CEO of a company called Digital Film Tree. Digital Film Tree has been around for probably about 20 years. It's one of the first companies, and he's been involved with DCS also since the very beginning. He was in our documentary in 2002, and I want to show you something.
Oh, wow.
And the guy hasn't changed at all.
I need some cinefilm.
He's a pretty amazing guy. And so let's find out about what you've been up to lately. You're always at the cutting edge. Always at the cutting edge. And so now you're into virtual production, and virtual production is mixing CGI with live action. And tell us about what you're doing.
It's good to be with you guys today. Thanks to Nanny being able to cover for me because I'm on babysitting duty today. Yeah, we're approaching our 20th year. We're a traditional post-production house and visual effects house. Over the last 18 years, we've been primarily occupied with the transition from physical, celluloid. I used to be a negative cutter when I first started in the industry. Then I transitioned to telecine, so I'm right on the cusp of the physical world transitioning to the file world. And it made sense for us to get involved with, cloud-based, which is essentially server-based or IP-based post-production. And, we do things like, as silly as that sounds, we connect productions to the internet. I call it IP logistics. And we've been doing it for about six years now. And it's allowed us to turn into kind of more of an ISP, an internet service provider, focusing specifically for production and post, like what we do for a living, as opposed to a dispassionate service that doesn't really care who we are. So that's our primary activity. And over the last 2 years, through just fortuitous circumstance, I befriended a architect for one of the big game engines, which is Unity. So right now, in the game publishing world and virtual production world, you have two Goliaths. There are Unreal and Unity. And they're superlative tools that help game publishers create games. And that's been going on for easily 20 years. And I won't get into how I met this person. His name is Adam Myhill. But this is not so much of a technical opportunity that approached us. It was more of a personal thing where I met this person. And it turned out that his first job was working in his dad's photography shop. So I was like, well, I've done negative cutting. So we started comparing notes. And I'm like, wow, we're kind of similar. We have similar sensibilities. And he used tools like Resolve and Avid. So he was kind of like us, but he was like an outer space, game engine architect dude. But I've been, thanks to him and other people like him, I've been on a very steep learning curve. And what I realized over the last year is that most of my friends and colleagues don't fully understand virtual production, which included me, right? I wasn't like, I didn't have any passion or interest in leveraging game engines for what we do for a living. But over time, I started to understand how it could benefit us. And also, I met people like Rob Legato and learned about the work of people like Jon Favreau, who've been using game engines on big feature films, like Ready Player One, Lion King most recently, Blade Runner 2049, Jungle Book, going back a little further. So I'm going to attempt to describe what I think it is as it relates to our world, which is primarily television. So back in the day when we used, people say, what do you do for a living? We say, we do post-production for TV. And it was always like, oh, how nice, TV. So it's really interesting how the center of gravity has shifted from feature films, which I think is, the standard, right, in terms of storytelling and production value, and how all of a sudden a lot of people we work with are from the feature film world. So that's been a really interesting development where we're working with people that actually have working with people on TV projects that have more experience with feature films than TV. So it's allowed us to play a role of educating and providing tools and techniques that make their life easier. So anyways, what it is for us is it's something that's hard to understand that primarily is in the big feature film space. Well, television, for the most part, has less than a year to produce 10 to 13 hours of content. A feature film reasonably can have up to 3 years to produce a 2-hour movie. So right there, you have a fundamental difference just based on time. And in television, my sense of it is that most people are under continual duress. Not to say that feature film people are not under continual duress, but it's just more persistent. And you're trying to do a lot. You're trying to produce something that looks cinematic, which is kind of the standard now. If you want to do a TV show, you want to make it look like a film. So what we've done is listen to our friends, like our clients that we work with, and we started pitching the game engine. And of course, like me, none of them really understood why it was relevant to them. So what we started doing is right around the time that they're writing the script, in one case, it was before the script was done, we would look at the script and then build the world that the script is representing as quickly as humanly possible. So this could be a scene in a square somewhere. You could have 5 actors, and it has cameras, right? So what we did is build in a virtual environment, which is you call CG or 3D, the scene that they're about to shoot in the physical world. And we do it with the same care and nuance as they're going to apply in the physical world, right? And then you can have people and actors behave just like the people in the physical world will behave once it's shot in the physical world, right? And what we found is that was really helpful to them, especially once we started applying techniques like LiDAR, photogrammetry, volumetric capture, where you're in this environment that we built for you, and then we spawn a virtual camera, which we made it look like a RED camera or an RE camera, just for shits and giggles. So you kind of recognize it. It's just floating in space. And then you can position it wherever you want to position it, whether it's a dolly, handheld, on a tripod. You can pick the camera lens, an 85 lens. And then you push this virtual play button and the scene plays. And then you can push record as the scene is playing. So there's 2 things going on here. You have essentially a virtual camera imaging system that is shooting a virtual environment, and we are essentially mimicking what happens in the physical world. So that's what was so interesting to me once I finally understood it.
Moving storyboards?
Yes, it's kind of like a storyboard that comes to life. And oftentimes, once people start getting into it, they provide us their storyboards, which makes it really easy to build the world lickety-split. But oftentimes, we just had someone talking, or they would send an email, or they would provide a script or a script in the making. And the thing that has happened, especially over the last 6 months, which really blew my mind, was it would often start with the showrunner who's conceptualizing the idea. And invariably, next it would be the DP, right, who has to image it. And those were the first 2 stakeholders that we got traction with. And by the way, we're doing this for TV, which has no time and no money, right? Because I got to experience all the heavy, hardcore, heavy iron tools that are used on feature films, and that was my inspiration. I was like, wow. Then I said, hey, why don't we do this for TV? And for whatever reason, not a lot of people are interested. So I said, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to do that. I work on TV. I like TV. I have a lot of relationships, and I think this could help them. So it started with the showrunner and the DP, and over the last 4 projects, remarkably, we are working with the production design team, because once they found out about it, they said, I want to see the previs. We're working with not only the DP, but the camera department. They would ask for simple things like, if I have my virtual camera here and my object, the actor is there, can you give me the actual measurement between those 2 things? We're like, we actually never thought of that. And we're like, yeah, we have a LiDAR. It's a relatively accurate representation of the physical world, right? Then we started playing around with things like Google Maps. Like you say, I want to shoot in Savannah, Georgia on this street. Well, we can just light that up and immediately give you the environment. Now, mind you, it's not textured. You know how Google has just cartoony buildings and stuff? But that, as soon as you think it, that's your starting point. That's what we do now routinely. So for location people, mind-blowing. I mean, we can just visualize the world without them having to fly there or prepare them as they go there, right? And then it was wardrobe, because it's kind of this auto magic box where I can change your jacket into a wife beater, right? Just like that. And then set dressing, because desks and chairs and placement, well, that's really easy. We can just plop them in. Before we knew it, we had 12 departments raining down on us with their own requests, with their own pain points, and that has really been beyond rewarding. And I have to say, we didn't even envision or have an inspiration. It was more, we put it in front of them, and then they started asking for things across different departments. And oftentimes, we could be working with 2 departments that are not even talking to each other. They all had their own unique requests. But when it all comes together, the thing that I think makes this such a profound tool is that people can just look at it and go, oh, okay, that's what we're supposed to do. And that's what they call the previs aspect of virtual production. In addition to that, we're starting to delve into, the engine doesn't care if you have a low-resolution cartoony character that's walking around. It could be something that's photoreal, something that was already pre-made, like an existing Disney character, or a digital scan, what they call a body double. And you can now play, it's really remarkable. You can play like a low-res animation thing and a photoreal human just for the hell of it, because you can. It's resolution. An avatar. It's resolution independent. So right now we're playing in the previs space, which is highly helpful for TV. And I would have never thought that. And I didn't even understand it to begin with, to be quite honest. But once the use cases became clear, it became crystal clear how beneficial. And I'll say one thing. This VR thing, I hate that. I've always hated VR. I think VR sucks. I mean, I personally loathe VR. It makes me ill. I'm not a gamer. I mean, I'm back in the 25-cent arcade days, right? I'm not the right qualified individual to be doing this, but what we did is we hired people who are comfortable with this. One of our staff spent 12 hours in this environment once, just to demonstrate that it doesn't bother him. So there are people wired differently than me, or what I say, us, because none of my friends and colleagues in TV like VR. I don't think I've met one. We did meet one VFX supervisor that we recently served that was an anomaly. He put it on, and he started visualizing his scene in the VR world, which is kind of beneficial because you have the whole thing, right? When you put this on, you have the entire world like this. But most of the people we work with just look at a 2D screen like that, right? So we started building tools that take what's in the VR space, but specifically for normal people like me that are never going to put this on. And once we did that, then anyone was able to engage it. And that's, I hope that was coherent, because I think my biggest challenge right now is just explaining it to my friends.
Well, it doesn't seem like it's that far off where you're going to cross the threshold where it won't be just previs, but it'll be ready for broadcast or beyond.
The low-lying fruit is animation production. So we're already working on 2 projects that are not previs at all. I mean, we use previs in the crafting of the narrative, but it's all like, I call it Pixar in a box, right? We're going to build, we are doing already animation, television production within the game engine, and you still have to interact with Maya, After Effects, Nuke, Houdini, you know, because we're a visual effects department, I had the benefit of visual effects people that could kind of not be scared of this, right? Traditional visual effects and virtual productions are not exactly the same, but a lot of the tools cross over. So we started having our game engine artists and developers actually hang out with our visual effects people. They didn't really like each other at first. They're like, I don't understand what you're saying. I know you use Houdini, but you know, over time, and because I kind of said this has to happen, they now work in concert, and that's super rewarding. I love it when different disciplines commingle in the same room that usually don't hang out together, and they solve the most exquisite problems possible, and I think that's why we're making such headway.
So this is just one of the things you're into. Do you still do DI at Digital Film Tree?
Yes.
And everything else?
Yes, I mean,
complete finishing services.
just I'm not a DP at all. But when I started my career, I bought the Canon XL1. I've always had this drive for imaging. I always buy the latest cameras. I shoot my own stuff. That's how I started. But one of the things we're doing right now, just in terms of like tech porn, after a lot of years, we found this storage methodology where we are using a technology called NVMe mesh, which essentially allows us in our environment to play multiple, like literally dozens of streams of 8K HDR as if it was a proxy. It basically saturates a 100 gig pipe, and you can just play it without punishment. Now the storage component, of course, you have to pay for storage, but the performance is there. And that's been really cool. So we went from like our old tired, you know, performance sand to now something that is running at 100 gigs throughout the facility, and that's jaw-dropping. But again, most people don't care about that.
Tell us a little bit more about the cloud service.
The cloud service, so many years ago, we made it possible for our clients to essentially store the entirety of all their camera raw, everything that's image for their show, without punishing them. That's it. It's kind of like if you have iPhoto, your videos and images are on a cloud server. In our case, we manage the server, and it's supported by actual post people who know what production does for a living. So we speak the same language. We're able to support them. We're able to traffic camera raw files all around the world. We do remote dailies. We've been doing it for years. And it's really about having security, because that was the pain point. The technology was relatively there all along, but the security of trafficking camera raw is by far the biggest challenge. And so we ended up hiring a federal marshal who's able to consult us, who's a cybersecurity expert, and that's where we lurched forward and really fortified our entire operation, essentially using the same techniques that's used by the NSA and governmental agencies, security best practices that are in outer space compared to where we are in Hollywood. So we didn't want to build a whole new security wheel. We wanted to leverage best of breed security policies in other industries that were much further along than we were. And I think that's what really made our cloud-based post-production and remote services accelerate.
Now, I think you have this capability, correct me if I'm wrong, but a DP like Mark Doring-Powell, who's here.
Yes, I work with Mark on Everybody Hates Chris,
and,
way back when.
Mark could be on location doing his next picture, and you could set up a remote color timing session for him to be grading while the data is all on your servers back in Los Angeles.
Correct. Yes, we've been doing that for years based on something called a virtualized Postgres database that already comes with Resolve. So we're essentially an Avid house and a Resolve house. Is Michael still here? Okay, we're mostly a Resolve house. So what we do is we've been doing remote, and not just remote color, but we do remote conform, remote creative editorial, remote delivery, remote dailies. It's because we essentially took what Blackmagic put out there for everyone. Everyone has it if you want to use it. It's a local Postgres database that allows someone using Resolve in the color department, conform department, dailies department to be on the same database, which is hyper efficient, hyper collaborative. So what we did is we virtualized it so that the people can be anywhere in the world, as opposed to being in the building. So we kind of circumvented the local database and made it virtual for our clients.
I love that because I don't want to give producers any excuse not to let me go in color time, you know.
Yes.
If I'm somewhere else.
And the beauty of this, we did this for DPs. This was not for producers because they didn't really care. And when we pitched this, they were like, who cares? But for DPs, it was like, it's camera raw. It's what comes out of the sensor, right? So if you're in Georgia, we're presenting you the color session as if you were in a bay and you're looking at the camera raw, not a representation of it, not an H.264 or lossless or 100 derivatives of lossless that are out there. We said we're not doing any of that. It's the camera raw that you're looking at. And I like that. That's really cool. Whenever DPs are able to experience that, we've had nothing but a positive experience because it's not a representation.
Thank you. Like I said, he's always on the cutting edge. He was one of the real pioneers of file-based editing and still going strong. Thank you so much.
As are you, Jim. You're still going strong.
I'm fading.